This is the Zilliqa Weekly Update with Amrit Kumar. I'm your host, Chase Raz, and of course, joining me is Amrit Kumar. Hi there. The president of Zilliqa. We were debating on which of the many hats you wear, which ones I should talk about. But before you say a word, Amrit, you have a new background behind you. What's going on behind you?
Behind me?
Yeah, that wasn't there last week, was it?
I think so. Usually I'm sitting here. That's my home office.
It is. Okay, so I'm just trying to get people to go back and watch all the other episodes, I guess. Today, we've agreed to talk about, well, what we just talked about. If we're talking about Pillar today, aren't we?
Right.
That's going to make people very happy. But, one thing I want to put out before we really dig deep is that it's important to recognize that Pillar is an independent project, isn't it? It was created by a guy, isn't it, Pascal, correct?
Yes. I mean,
Yes.
it's still kind of anonymous person there.
Oh,
But
okay. Pascal, I'm sorry, but your name's all over Twitter, my friend. So,
uh,
and I'd love to have you on to talk about something sometime, but right now, focusing on Pillar, but everyone keep in mind, I didn't make Pillar. Amrit, did you make Pillar?
no, I didn't. And of course, Zilliqa has funded the development of that project, but it's Zilliqa is not the one behind building and development. So it's whether it be tokenomics, whether it be the actual code itself, it's fully written by and Pascal,
Whose
who
name
is
we're not saying.
who is behind the Pillar protocol.
Right. So I want to start there even before we get into what Pillar is for folks who may not know. One thing that people really love to know, and I found, is what are the connections? Who's behind what? So you mentioned that Zilliqa does have some connection with Pillar. Can you kind of repeat for a moment what that is, what Zilliqa's role, if any, is, and how the support process plays out?
So the connection between Zilliqa as an entity and the Pillar development team is basically the same as the relationship between ZIL and every other project that you see in the space. In the sense that Zilliqa has funded the development of via grants. So Zilliqa has given a grant to the team to be able to develop this Pillar project. And that's kind of the relationship that we have as with, for example, ZIL, with Moonlit, with ViewBlock, with Sitio, ZIL swap, and you name it.
We
So
need the
that's the
list.
same
We need
relationship.
a scroll. I'm not going to do this, but we need a scrolling list behind us so we can just name drop everybody in the space. That'd be good. All of those really good examples, though, and I think that helps people. So that should clear up the relationship of, okay, who is this coming from? Where is it coming from? And of course, if the completely anonymous developer of Pillar, wants to talk about that, we'll defer to the Twitter account that they run. But walk us through, because I will have some questions for you later about this, but what is Pillar? Even if you have to answer from a Zilliqa only point of view, what is Pillar? What are we getting ready for?
So very simply put, it's a stable coin that's not backed by fiat. And that's interesting because, again, now we have seen all sorts of stable coins popping up in different ecosystems. But
Like
if you
backed,
go back,
algorithmic,
exactly,
baskets, everything.
exactly. Now, but if you go back 2, 3 years ago when MakerDAO was developing its first product, the DAI stablecoin, at that point, it was not super clear, before that. So before MakerDAO, it was not super clear how to build a stablecoin in a completely decentralized manner. And what I meant by and what I mean by decentralized stablecoin, I mean stablecoin that's not backed by a centralized entity. Basically, we don't want to build USDT, we don't want to build USDC. We want to build a stablecoin that has no connection whatsoever with a centralized entity. Because if you have USDT, it has somehow connected with fiat and therefore existing governments. If you have USDC, similar story and so on. So that was the idea, to be able to build a stablecoin that is purely decentralized. Okay. Of course, MakerDAO has changed a little bit of direction and all that. Now you have USDC as one of the collaterals, but that was this essential main goal initially. And it was not quite well known at that point how to build that, because people always felt that if you want a stable asset, you need something stable behind it, right? That's how human sort of intuition works, right? If you want something that is fixed, you need to somehow relate it with something that's fixed. And this is where the design of MakerDAO, popped up, and which was interesting because it was able to construct a stable coin from a volatile asset, which was Ether in that case, right? So Pillar is very similar to MakerDAO in that sense. So it designs a stable coin that's backed by a volatile asset, Zilliqa in case of Pillar, and Ether in case of MakerDAO. Obviously, things have changed over time with DAI. Now you have USDC and other assets, but essentially that's the story. And so this is a short summary. We can go into details of why it's interesting, this design. But this, in a very simple term, it's a stable coin that's not backed by fiat. It's backed by a volatile asset.
So that leads to, I would guess, over-collateral. Of course, I can't talk while I'm doing an interview. Over-collateralization.
True. So, the design of stable coins like MakerDAO and Pillar are interesting because what they basically do is they take two market participants. So you have people who are long on a volatile assets because you want to build a stable coin out of a volatile asset. So you need to see who wants to use that volatile asset, right? So you have one participant in the ecosystem which is long on that asset. So they feel that, okay, this asset is going to go up, and therefore I want to accumulate as much as I can that underlying asset, the volatile asset, right? And then there are these people who don't like volatility, right? So these are the second participants. They don't like volatility at all. And so what they basically say is, look, I want a system where I can use stable coins. So these are basically stable coin holders, stable coin consumers. And on the other hand, you have these volatile users, people who are not volatile users, but users who want volatile assets, right?
They're volatile. We heard you say it, Amrit. They're volatile users.
So basically what they do is this system basically asks people who want to take a long position on a volatile asset, asks them to put a collateral, which is wZILs in case of Pillar, and then allows them to borrow, or rather mint, a certain stable coin. So Pillar in this case, so PIL. So for example, if you put, let's say, $100 worth of wZIL as collateral, you can mint, let's say, $50 worth of Pillar stable coin. And why is it exciting for me as a person who likes volatility? Because I can take that Pillar stable coin, I can sell that in the market to you because you like stable coins. For example, you're a stable coin consumer.
I do.
So I'm going to sell these Pillar tokens to you as a stable coin, and I will buy wZILs from you in exchange. And then what I'm basically doing is I'm basically building my wZIL stack, right? So if I'm long on the underlying asset, which is wZIL, I'm actually building that even further by taking a leverage position, right?
Good DeFi proposition there.
Exactly.
Now, I like this, except for you're getting my wZIL in this equation, and that's not going to happen either. But that brings me to the next question that I hear a lot, and you and I have talked about this. I struggle with this as well, being completely serious. There's been the communication that this is not a lending platform per se, or this is not a lending platform. I'm putting the per se. Some people have flat out said this isn't a lending platform. Where do you fall on that, and how do you educate people like me who are very, I have to say, like, I'm familiar with these different things, but I'm having a tough time not saying, well, but I could use this to lend to myself. I could use it for that. What's sort of the semantics or the idea around it that gets me back in the right way of thinking about this?
Right. So I think a key differentiation that people have to keep in mind is you have the difference between Pillar and traditional, the way we call it, a money market fund, is the same between, let's say, MakerDAO and Aave or Compound. So what happens in Compound is, let's say you have some excess money, you have some excess, let's say BTC, you have some excess USDT, and you want to lend that asset to someone else. Okay, so you want to give it to someone else, and that person takes that collateral, takes that asset, and then is able to return you a certain interest rate. Okay, it's something very similar to traditional lending business that you see in the market. Here, you can call it lending, but it's not a place. Pillar is not a place where people come and lend and borrow. So two different people don't come together in that way.
Okay.
Right? So it's not a place where you say, okay, here's my USDT, take my USDT and give me 1% interest rate over time. That's not how it works. Essentially, it is a system where you're basically minting stable coins. Yes, it's true what you mentioned. It's true that I could take my collateral, which is wZIL. I put that collateral in the stablecoin system, and then I mint Pillar. Essentially, when you're minting Pillar, you're basically borrowing that Pillar stablecoin. But it's not like you are using some other party and you're giving that asset to some other party to borrow, right? So you are the minter, and you are the collateral, provider basically. So that's why the difference is basically between Compound and MakerDAO. That's the difference.
I'm going to ask you a technical question that, again, right, we want to remember that we're not the team for this project, but to my understanding, and you've worked with this, you've worked with the beta, you've seen the product working. Does it still have this process that people should be prepared for, that you take your ZIL and you still wrap ZIL and get wZIL, and then you put that in order to receive the pill stablecoin?
Yes, so I think initially when they had launched their first version, I think 3-4 months ago, they didn't have that moving from ZIL to wrap ZIL feature within their app itself. You had to go through an ID and all that, but now they have integrated that feature within the app itself. So you have literally one button to click wZIL to ZIL, and then ZIL to wZIL. So but yes, okay, you still have to go through, and the reason is because it's very similar to, for example, why you have Ethereum as an ERC20 token on different DEXs, different DeFi protocols in Ethereum, because it makes things homogeneous, right? Because Ethereum as a native asset works very differently from, let's say, an ERC20 asset. And when you want them to be very similar and be handled in a seamless way with the underlying protocols, you want both of them to be ERC20. So what you basically do is you create a wrapped version of Ether, and that's kind of what wrapped ZIL is all about too. So yes, the short answer is yes, you still have to go through ZIL to wZIL.
You go through that process. It's just a little easier, a little more streamlined, it seems like. When using Pillar in general, there, of course, whether you and I like it or not, there are a good number of our friends here in the space that are here for returns, if you will. We know that Pillar is going to have gZIL staking, but it's not gZIL staking in the sense that I think a lot of people still think it's going to be, I'm going to stake my gZIL and I'm going to get some return on it. I think this is a perfect question to ask you from the Zilliqa point of view. What is Pillar doing with gZIL? How is it working? What are some of the potential benefits of people, staking it, not trying to sell it, not trying to shill it or anything like that? And how does that coincide with Zilliqa's vision for gZIL, even beyond Pillar, even beyond Ignite?
So obviously, when we started gZIL, the whole idea behind gZIL was to be able to build a governance protocol or governance token that is, that is fairly distributed. Again, there are all sorts of questions around that, but ideally we didn't want to have any pre-mine, we didn't want to have any holding by the team or anyone else. If you come and participate in the staking system, and if you are active, then you would earn gZIL. So it was as simple as that. So the idea was to be able to use that gZIL to be able to bootstrap all governance-related projects around Zilliqa. Again, so it's not because we have seen Uniswap, we have seen SushiSwap, so you always have a governance token for each dApp project.
Right.
And it's debatable whether they are really governance tokens or they are really a token that actually offsets your IL, right, impermanent loss, right? But anyway, the point is that we wanted to have one token that could be lifted from the protocol layer, so you could use that to decide on, let's say, inflation at the Zilliqa level, at the protocol level. You could decide on unbonding period, but you could also lift that to the application layer and could say, look, let's use gZIL to decide on what should be the interest rate for Pillar protocol, for example. So that was the kind of the vision where we wanted to pull gZIL as a token that doesn't just govern at the protocol layer, but could be used for all sorts of applications as well. Now, this is kind of where Pillar came into play. So Pillar obviously was the first protocol, I think, that was announced that wanted to use gZIL as governance token. And therefore, its design is kind of very different from MakerDAO. So MakerDAO has this MKR token, and where that MKR gets replaced by gZIL basically in Pillar. And so the idea is that obviously Pillar has its own parameters that you may want to decide upon. For example, the interest rate. For example, let's say the collateral ratio. At what point? So for example, if you want to mint 10 pills, how many ZILs you have to put as a collateral, right? So this basically measures the risk as well, right? So these could be measured and decided by the community who own gZIL tokens. So what Pillar has done is they are defined sort of two types of gZIL token holders. So one who are, let's call it non-whales, and those who are whales. And so what you can do as a gZIL token holder is you can come to the Pillar protocol and you could stake your gZIL. And when you stake, you can stake individually, right? Like I'm staking my gZIL with a contract and I'm done. Or you could stake, or rather delegate, to some existing player. For example, let's say Moonlet. The way you are, for example, staking right now with Moonlet, you could stake with someone else. So for example, let's say Chase has 1,000 gZILs. Let's stake with Chase, for example.
Can you send me 1,000 gZIL? Can we make this true? Okay, so we pretend somebody has 1,000 gZIL.
You want to stake with them, for example. And the benefit that you may get is when you want to propose a change to the Pillar protocol, you need to have a sufficient number of gZIL to be able to propose that. So in case, let's say, if you are staking individually, if let's say you only have one gZIL, you may not have enough to make that proposal. But if you stake together, basically pool together, then you may hit that number that you're looking for. And that's why there's a difference between staking individually and delegating with an existing staker, right? So you have two choices there, and there's no difference in terms of incentives. It stays the same. The only difference comes from governance, being able to provide and make a proposal to change certain parameters of the protocol. Now, you mentioned about gZIL staking is not like your regular staking. This is true because in a regular staking, what do you expect? So you put your assets, for example, ZILs or Ether or whatnot, and you earn the same asset, right? And roughly speaking, it's generally fixed. Again, it depends on how much stake has been logged in, but roughly speaking,
I'm going complete degen. I went 300% return.
Yes, it goes very constant very quickly, right? While gZIL staking is a bit different in Pillar protocol. One, because it's a stablecoin system. Remember, it's not a system which is supposed to generate returns for everyone. It is a stablecoin system. That's a basic infrastructure to have. And so if you are staking with gZIL, basically imagine, for example, you have staked your gZIL, and I am a person who had taken that loan. So I had taken put my ZIL as collateral, took my Pillar, and I'm about to return my Pillar back. Right?
Minted your stables, about to repay yourself.
Exactly. Now, when you repay your loan, which is still here, you may have to pay a certain interest rate. So let's say you're paying interest rate of 1%. Okay, so you have to pay for 100 ZIL, you pay, let's say 100 pill that you take as loan, you have to pay 1 pill back as interest rate. Now, this 1 pill will get distributed across all the gZIL holders who are staking with Pillar. Now, as you can imagine, it doesn't guarantee a return in terms of yield because it depends on the actual return that you may get on this. It basically depends on how many people are borrowing pills, how many people are closing their positions, and the size of their position, because it's always a percentage, right? So if you're borrowing 10 pills, you will pay 1% of that. If you're borrowing more, you'd be.
So the healthier the ecosystem is, the better the gZIL stakers stand. Exactly. The better they stand. We can just say that. What happens, and I think you were about to segue into this, what happens if somebody gets, the collateralization level gets off? People can, to my understanding, and this may be better directed to the team, but people can be liquidated, correct? Right? If you go under that threshold, just like any type of stable minting or loan protocol anywhere else you may see. How does that impact gZIL, or does it?
Yeah, so it does. So unlike in a centralized system where you default, the centralized system gets benefit from this. For example, if you had taken loan or mortgage on your apartment and you didn't return the loan back, then the mortgage provider takes your house and basically auctions it off and takes its money back.
Plus some.
Yeah, and in this model, the decentralized model, you don't have that centralized entity basically. So it gets that incentive is given to everyone. So if you see that someone's collateral is going to go underwater very quickly, you may want to jump on and then basically get that, liquidate that asset and get hold of that collateral basically. Now, there's an incentive for people. There's an indirect incentive for people. So, for example, whenever a certain collateral gets liquidated, a portion of the collateral goes to the developer so that they have the incentive to maintain the network and make sure that the feature request gets handled and so on. And I think 30%, if I'm not wrong, is taken to buy gZIL from the market and then burns. So it also creates a scarcity for gZIL in the market via Pillar protocol.
I have wanted to ask this question for a very long time, and this truly is my question. I don't know if anyone else has it. How do you, and by proxy, Zilliqa research, feel about the burning of gZIL. It scares me in a way. It's the governance token. It's already limited. But I want to ask you directly, how does that fit in? Are you comfortable with it? Does it fit in with the larger vision of gZIL and those types of things? So just directly to it, give me some analysis on this burning of gZIL. Good, bad, indifferent. Where do we stand with it?
Well, there are obviously there's several models that you could work here, right? You could say, okay, this asset could be taken, and then you could use that, let's say ZIL, for example, and then buy gZIL from the market and then distribute to all the stakers as well. That's one model. The other model is to create further scarcity in the market by, basically burning those assets. Again, it's difficult to say which one is better and which one is not, because there are all sorts of models out there today in the market. I'm pretty sure that if the committee feels otherwise, that this model is not the best model, then I'm pretty sure that that could be voted in at some point, through the governance process that Pillar puts in place.
Well, I just wondered, because once you move from the network level to the application level, if and when other projects adopt gZIL as the governance token, if that fits in with their tokenomics, as we say, if that fits in, then that, of course, would have an impact on the larger ecosystem as well, the multiple protocols, multiple different decentralized applications and whatnot that would be using gZIL. So I thank you for answering that. I just wanted to get an insight there. The last question that I have, we have talked about ZIL, PIL, wZIL, gZIL. I have to ask.
And there's one more, wZIL.
bZIL. I'll just leave it there. bZIL. What about bZIL?
Okay, so bZIL is something that we had in mind when we were actually launching gZIL, because we felt that at that point, the reason why we had bZIL is basically because you wanted to have a liquid staking mechanism. So imagine, for example, you have all these assets getting logged, and if that asset, the percentage of circulating supply that gets logged in staking, if that went up by, let's say, went as high as, let's say, 99%, let's say, in a hypothetical scenario. In that case, you may have a crisis, liquidity crisis in the market, right? Because you may not have enough ZILs in the market to be able to buy and trade and so on.
Right.
So the idea behind bZIL was to be able to create that liquidity in the market if you're staking. For both good and bad reasons, the supply, the circulating supply is not quite there yet. I think we still have enough supply in the market to be able to not to worry about a liquidity crisis at any point in time. But that was the initial intention. Now, you could imagine, so the other idea that we had was very similar to, I think, alchemy that came out much later. But the idea was to be able to build a system where you could have a self-paying loan of kind of mechanism, where basically what you do is you will take your ZIL as collateral. You'll take your ZIL and put that into staking, and that ZIL basically becomes your collateral for Pillar protocol, essentially. So you don't have to get more ZILs outside from the market to put that in Pillar. So you take that staked ZILs, and that becomes your collateral. And then whatever money you're making from staking could be used to be able to pay your interest that you owe to Pillar. And that could have been done, for example, by bZIL. So for example, let's say if you had staked, let's say 100 ZIL, you could have given, let's say, 50 bZIL. And that again becomes a leverage, right? Because when you are given 100 ZIL, even though your assets are logged, you are given 50 bZIL to play around with, right? And you could take those 50 bZILs and put that as a collateral in Pillar, and then be able to mint Pillar stablecoins, use that for something else, and then return back your interest rate, once you have staking returns. So it becomes, you could connect Pillar and sort of staking together in some way to be able to build a system that allows you to, basically become pay your loan via staking returns.
Now, is that something that is still kind of on the proverbial roadmap, or is that something that right now there's just not the market need for it? I guess I'm asking, what's the status of bZIL in relation to Pillar now launching?
Yeah, so I would still like to wait and see how things work. First of all, today you could still do this manually in some way, right? Because, not liquidity, but for example, let's say if you have to pay your interest rate that you have to pay to Pillar, you could still do that through staking returns. That's still possible. What's not possible right now is the collateral. So you still have to need extra separate collateral for Pillar protocol.
So for now, a wait and see approach.
Yeah,
See
so we'd like
if
to see how Pillar goes. We also don't want to risk too much capital at this point. I mean, for the community, so we'd like to see how Pillar gets accepted. But the change should not be enormous, I would say, if we have to make this change on the staking side.
Well, thank you.
But then we need to see how the traction a little bit before we push that out.
I think that's perfectly sensible. That makes a lot of sense to take a wait and see approach doesn't always work. In this case, it really seems like the common sense approach. So we've talked about a lot of different types of ZIL today. We've talked about the PIL token, the Pillar token, the stablecoin. Amrit, as always, what did I miss? What are some final words from you that you'd like people to know about?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is very clear. Pillar, is an interesting sort of application that I think gives people a way to leverage. But again, make sure that you understand how it works. You could end up in a situation where you may not, your asset may go down and you may get liquid and you will basically lose your ZILs. So be careful with. So there are risks associated with every single DeFi protocol out there, and Pillar is no exception to it. So make sure that you understand the risks involved with Pillar protocol and then get involved in it.
Good to know. Thank you, Amrit. Until next week.
Thanks very much.